All right. Who's your favorite Street Fighter character?
My favorite?
Yeah.
The one I played with the most?
Yeah, your favorite.
E Honda.
E Honda.
Yeah.
E Honda all the way. Okay, nothing wrong with that. I mean, I like E Honda.
Yeah, I played as him the most. Him and Blanca.
Yeah, well, E Honda was kind of the cheesiest if you really think about it, because he had the 1,000-hand slap, and Blanca too, because he had the same attack. He had the same thing. He had the electric attack.
It's the only moves I knew how to do.
Because you just slap the punch button over and over again. I preferred Chun-Li. That's who I played with the most back in the day. Yeah, I played with Chun-Li a lot. I was introduced to the game by an old friend, Shane Baxter. I think you might remember him.
Yeah.
And he was the first person that ever told me, hey, there's this new game, you need to go check it out. Because it wasn't in Refurio yet. I think I had to go to Victoria to play it for the first time. I went to their theater, and that was the first time I ever saw the Street Fighter 2 machine. And you couldn't play the Street Fighter 2 machine, by the way. You could only look at it and watch the line, because it was all a bunch of like kids who were like at that time really old to me, when they were like 14 and 15-year-olds, and then they dominated. They put their quarter up top and like they were able to do the moves and stuff like that. And you should know, back in that era, like it wasn't even like on the arcade, like the move list or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you just had to like figure that shit out. That was the only way it worked. And like, I have very clear memories of playing it. And I think I remember like pestering my grandfather to take me to the movies just so I could go out and play. I remember he got mad at me because I forget what movie he took me to, but I went to the bathroom and I noticed that there was nobody there. So that was the first time I played Street Fighter, was in between probably some like, I don't know, maybe like a Tim Allen Family movie or something like that. I snuck away to play Street Fighter 2, the original version. And I got totally mauled by the computer because I had no idea what I was doing. But I was just like captured by it. Like it just.
Yeah, it captured me too.
Yeah, it really did. And then like I can remember when it finally came to of all things, the Circle K, as funny as that is, the Circle K in Refurio, our hometown, like it was really like just a big achievement, a big deal to be able to go there and play that.
Yeah.
I remember it so fondly. So. Yeah, Chun-Li's the answer to the question, and now I heaped a lot of Street Fighter nostalgia on you for no particular reason.
No, it's good. It's good to have that nostalgia. I also have nostalgia for the game. It was one of the first fighting games that I ever played. Played the Super Nintendo Turbo version. I also bought the controller, the Turbo controller, with all the dials on it, just so that I could play.
Yeah, I remember that.
I could play Turbo.
Yeah, I remember cheating in some RPGs with that. I forget, it was one of the Final Fantasies. One of the mini games was you had to tap the button as fast as you could.
Yeah.
And it even said in the directions the Chocobo gave you, don't use one of those controllers that lets you use Turbo. And we immediately went and grabbed the worthless third-party controller.
So much fun.
Yeah, that was the only thing that controller had going, because the D-pad was pure like it felt like mashed potatoes when you tried to move your character around. But you had the turbo buttons on it, so we used it for a few things like that. That was always like, the scrub controller.
Yeah.
If you got that one, that means we didn't like you. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Gritty Reboot. I'm Pedro.
And I'm Meredith.
As you might have guessed from our pretty long intro here, usually we ramble on for a minute before we play the music. We're going to play the music now. Who knows? But we're talking about Street Fighter today.
Yeah.
And before we got into Street Fighter, I wanted to talk about what we're going to be doing coming up next week. We're going to be going down our best of the year, basically. Mm-hmm. We're going to do our year-end wrap-up in the middle and end of January. And we're going to do our best of, we're going to do our worst of list. And so we'll have that coming up next week. And we've had a real ball catching up with some of the better films of the year that we just missed, because no matter how hard you try and how hard you really try to stick with a schedule of movies and things like that, like you're going to get in a situation where just some movies fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And it's nice to sort of catch up on some of those movies and stuff like that. And maybe I think we've seen a couple of flicks that we wouldn't normally get to. But the reason I brought it up is because we had somehow missed out on Barbarian.
Yes.
Because we were going to go see it in the theater.
We were.
And instead we saw Halloween Kills instead, or Halloween Ends, pardon me. And we completely regret that. And we can go back to like episode 14 and listen to that crap. But we hated that. And you'll probably see it again on the worst of list. Spoiler. But no, we didn't go see Barbarian instead. But somehow I managed to stay in the dark about what it was really about besides an Airbnb-based horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know anything else. And it wasn't until this viewing, we got a chance to watch it a few days ago, where I was like, man, I am so thankful that I didn't know anything about that movie. So if you're going to see that movie, if you're possibly thinking about it, I just want to make sure everybody knows, do not Google anything about it. Don't go to the Wikipedia page. Just get on HBO Max. Just rent it however you can and just check it out. If you're not a big fan of like, if you don't like horror movies, probably not the flick for you.
No,
but if you can enjoy
horror for sure.
Yeah, but if you can enjoy or stomach horror movies, and the movie builds real tension, a lot of tension, multiple times. If you really can't handle that, it's not the movie for you. But if you can, I mean, it's a real wild ride.
The movie is so good. It's claustrophobic. It's spine tingling.
A little funny.
It's got its moments. Yeah. It's so good. It's
very impressive considering like what all it has to do. I honestly like it. It's definitely going to be on my top of the year list. That's spoiler. I don't know where I'm putting it just yet because like the rankings is driving me insane about like where I put things and stuff like that. Because it's a movie that I like. I know you're probably going to give me some crap for. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah,
and I didn't know we were doing worst of either. So I'm glad you told me and everybody else what we were doing because I had no idea.
You didn't know we were doing a worst of list? I've talked about it like 4 or 5 times. Do you even listen to me when I talk about this show?
Apparently not.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, that's the plan at least. So we'll do that, and we'll mention a couple things about TV. But we're sticking basically to the movies and everything like that, and not games. I don't think I've played any game that came out this year, so that doesn't count.
Well, yeah, we don't have a PS5.
That's true. We don't. We need a PS5.
Well, right now we are not talking about the movies.
That's true. We are not talking about.
So we need to get on track.
That is very, very true. We definitely need to get back on track. So what we have is in 1994, we were okay. Well, I tell you what. We talked about Street Fighter a little bit. I do want to mention 1994, by the way, Street Fighter 2 in arcades, very fucking popular. It is probably the number 1 game in the world at that point. It is somewhere. It's in the middle of selling 16 million cartridges on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo combined. Mega Drive for our UK friends. So really, sometimes movies hit a little bit past their sell-by date when these video game adaptations hit. I talked about that a little bit last week with Tomb Raider. This is not the case here. So in 1994, Steven E. D'Souza gives us Street Fighter, starring Jean Claude Van Damme, Raul Julia, Ming-Na Wen, Damian Ciampa, Kylie Minogue, and Wes Studi.
And Byron Mann. As Ryu.
That's right.
Yeah.
Story time. This trailer, so long ago, captured my young mind.
The civil war in Shadowloo may have reached the turning point. The capital has just fallen.
In December 1994,
we got the movie trailer guy voice.
Mad dictator in a struggle for the fate of the world.
Whose name I always forget. So basically what occurs here is I end up dragging my poor father. Right now, there's like pictures of all the cast. Guile, Cammy. And I dragged my dad to this movie because I was so excited. You know, I love Street Fighter and, you know, we also love Jean Claude Van Damme. So it was a bit of a tough sell. Like I had my dad as Jean Claude Van Damme, but I lost him a bit at video game movies.
Yeah.
So he took a chance on it. And I can guarantee you, my dad absolutely hated this movie. I mean, just hated every frame of it.
Understand it.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know why all these people are here. There's all these weird characters.
It's such a bad movie.
What's going on? Like, why are all these things connected? So I can understand the issues that he had. And even as a kid, as a fan of the games, I didn't like the movie. I really didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not care for the movie when this came out. So I would like to publicly apologize to my dad for taking him to that movie because I begged for weeks. And we went on opening day and there was one other person in the theater with us. Despite that, the movie actually made some cash, right? It made some bank.
Yeah. Let's see.
I think didn't it just come under 100 million?
$35 million budget, 8 million. No, I just have the budget.
Yeah, I think worldwide this gross.
Oh wait, film gross $33 million domestic, $66 million worldwide.
99. Thank you, Marge.
Excuse me.
So no matter what, your voice is always so perfect and clear. And once I put a microphone in front of it, you become like Marge Simpson every few
I know.
minutes.
It's just the way it is.
So yeah, despite that, this movie made some bank, which is rather surprising. But it does speak to how very popular Jean Claude Van Damme was in 94 and the Street Fighter franchise. Because there were probably a ton of parents who got dragged to this movie and ended up really despising it or maybe appreciating some cheesy cinema. When did you first see this thing?
I'm trying to think back to when I saw this. I probably saw it when it came out. I didn't see it in the theater. I know that. Yeah, I probably saw it back then when it came out on TV. I wouldn't have rented it.
Yeah, because this lived on like USA for a good while.
It was a movie really, especially the trailer was just narrowed in on boys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, all this really is. You know,
Yeah.
I told you that how that happened, right? How video games became a boy toy. I should have chosen my words a little bit better.
Yeah.
How video games.
Odd.
I didn't mean it that way. I'm on a list now. How video games became a toy that was aimed directly at boys. Do you know how that happened? Because when the Japanese got here and they brought, or Nintendo, I should say, when they got here and they're like, listen, we want to sell in US toy stores. And they managed to convince people, even after there had been a video game crash, that they should carry a Nintendo. It ended up being a great call, obviously. When they got there, they quickly briefed Nintendo, like, listen, toys either go on the girl side or they go on the boy side. Where do we put this toy? Because that was the key thing. Nintendo had worked so hard to not say this was a video game console or electronics. It was a toy. And that's how they snuck it back into the US market. And they just picked the boy aisle. So that's why video games are primarily like for men here for like, what, 20 years?
Yeah.
Right. The idea of like a video game marketed to a woman didn't even come out. That wasn't even a thing people really considered until late 90s or early O's. And even then, it was more of a novelty.
It's better now.
But yeah, that's how we got that, as a matter of fact. It's sort of a strange thing, but it's just a strange artifact of retail. Ended up gendering it this whole hobby, basically, for a solid 25 years.
Yeah, I played some real male-dominated games.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things people don't kind of realize. Yeah, and, you look at like, we could talk about the game character designs and stuff like that. But, I mean, everybody is sort of like, bimboed, I think. Like Guile's he's got his tank top on, Chun-Li's, her legs are completely shown. Cammy's ass is hanging out. But, the dudes don't have shirts on either. So I think it's like a sort of like admiring like a Greek statue kind of thing is more like what Street Fighter's about, necessarily about like being horny. I think they're just like showing off like the well animated, like, muscular bodies.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of the art style because guys are huge, like T-Hawk and Zangief. And all those guys managed to make it into this film somehow, except for, sadly, Fei Long.
Yeah.
Fei Long, who, if you're unfamiliar with the Street Fighter games, basically a Bruce Lee kind of ripoff or knockoff kind of character. Not particularly important, but everybody else does make it into the movie.
What do you think about the game attire? You think it's faithful to the games?
Well, yes and no. Some things are. My issue with... I always want these movies to feel sort of genuine. And I think Stephen E. D'Souza, who was a pretty accomplished writer, he co-wrote Die Hard, I believe. So, I mean, he had some real movie chops. The way he sort of adapted this, well, there is some closeness, like there is some attention to what the game did and how people looked in the game. But I think what you end up seeing is things just aren't quite right, I think the worst person to talk about is Blanca.
Yeah.
Because everyone else sort of kind of looks like what they're supposed to. And when Blanca is finally transformed, like he's not like big or hulking out or anything like that. He just has really bad makeup. And he has like Mila Jovovich's hair from The Fifth Element, that red kind of weird bob look.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look anything at all like what Blanca's hair actually looked like. It's really, really bad.
And you can tell his skin has been dyed.
Very much so. It doesn't look encouraging at all. So the movie builds to like that one moment where they finally reveal him and he looks awful when they finally see him in his full makeup. And I mean, I find it hilarious, but I'm sure that's not what they were going for. So, like, and Zangief, like you don't get to see him, when you finally see him with his shirt off, he has like these Sharpie kind of marks on him for his scars. Like that just kind of feels half-assed for no particular reason. Like Ryu and Ken are technically in their attire, which is helpful, but that's just what's that?
A kimono?
A kimono, is that what it's called?
Oh, a gi.
A gi, thank you. They're just in their gis, and that's a pretty simple one to do. So some of them are on, some of them are off. Like what was the one that I think which one did you think was actually pretty good?
What do you mean, for attire?
Yeah, for attire.
I liked Chun-Li's, actually. I thought that was pretty faithful to some of the games.
Yeah, that was actually one of the better attires. I think they did a very good job with the Bison attire. because not only do they have to make him look like he did in the video game, which is kind of like a general warlord, dictator kind of look. You know, I'm sure you have an image in your head, and that's what Bison looks like if you've never seen him. But they also have to hide the fact that Raul Julia is like 95 pounds at the time they're shooting this movie. So they've heavily padded him up. And honestly, I really don't think you could tell if you didn't know that Raul Julia had terminal stomach cancer at the time that he shot this film. This would obviously be his final movie. But I think that's an incredible job by the costume department there. So I guess it's kind of like a C+, a passing grade, but not super impressive on how close they got to attire. Some of them are spot on. Some of them are kind of there. I don't know what's up with Jean Claude Van Damme's hair. Like it's blonde, but like 90s raver boy blonde.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know, like if he's gonna go out there and like try to fight some other characters, just like, like it's just like when I saw him, I was like, why didn't you dye it a real blonde color?
The cocaine he was on.
Oh yes. Jean Claude Van Damme. Just snorting cocaine like a madman.
He had a horrible drug problem. He was doing $10,000 worth of cocaine a day. $10,000, people. Let that sink into your brain. That is a hell of a lot of cocaine.
That really is. That means like he just would grab a handful of cocaine, just suck it right up immediately.
Who knows how many times a day he was a Hoover vacuum.
Yeah, basically that's all he was doing. To do 10,000, it'd have to be like the highest quality grade cocaine like ever made.
Probably was
like
pretty
it
good
directly squeezed from the cocoa leaf and then like ground by Pablo Escobar's zombie. So put together and that perfectly brewed for him and flown just to Jean Claude Van Damme's trailer so he could get up enough to pretend to fight cancer-stricken Raul Julia.
Yeah.
And listen, like Van Damme can be fine. And I say that because that's as good as Van Damme can be, is really fine. He's never offensive or just awful like Seagal can be. Or even, God forbid, Chuck Norris or someone like that, and those caliber of action stars. Van Damme has a decent level of charisma to him. This movie doesn't really show that off. He's really lousy here.
No.
He's really, really lousy. And I don't know why. You know, the movie tries to give him some fun one-liners. And I think the one-liners are to the film's detriment. I got a little section here of one-liners I'm going to play. And we're going to listen to the quality of writing that's in this film.
General Bison, he's a bad guy. If you know this, then why do you serve him?
Because he paid me a freaking fortune, you moron.
You got paid?
Popular guy, the greatest cage fighter since Iron Fist. Oh yeah, what happened to him? He retired and became me.
My boat.
Who talks like that? Who talks like that?
And I'm going to kick that son of a bitch Bison's ass so hard that the next Bison wannabe is gonna feel it. Man enough to fight with me.
Anyone who opposes me will be destroyed.
Raul Julia making it sound great.
Village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
It was just Tuesday.
2 hours. Maybe next month.
There's the movie's hand job joke.
Be a happy man.
Next, I'll make you a dead one.
So the movie has the feel for cheesy one-liners.
Yeah.
And so this is a movie, and Bruce Willis shouldn't have been cast in it, but like one-liners are something Bruce Willis eats in his sleep. Like it's not a problem for him to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like he's one of those actors that that's not an issue. He's a real actor, so he can pull them off while like Arnold struggles with them. Like you watch like Last Action Hero, Arnold is struggling trying to make like quippy and funny dialogue. He's just dying out there in this movie. And Van Damme, I guess, I don't know if he realized the cheesiness of it, but like this has to be said about this movie right now. This is a kid's movie. This is 100% a children's movie. And in the 90s, it was okay to make kind of a violent and a little vulgar children's movie. Look at Problem Child.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and that's kind of what this movie is, because it has some sex jokes in it. You know, there's some scantily clad, you know, women and stuff like that. And you have the guys, obviously, you're not wearing shirts and stuff like that. But like, obviously it's violent, but it is a movie aimed squarely at like 10-year-olds. And I want to make that clear from the film's tone. And I think that's something that gets kind of put against it. But when D'Souza is making a game, he's making this movie game adaptation for his like 10-year-old son. Like that's who he aimed it at. And that's why this movie has a really, really goofy tone that really only Raul Julia seems to be in on.
There's an oil painting in Bison's private quarters of a frowning clown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I know what this is.
This is in reference to Pogo the Clown, an oil painting by John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, it wasn't until this viewing of it that I recognized what that was.
Yeah.
Because he has two joke paintings. He has him as Napoleon on that famous painting, which makes sense and it is amusing. Everything about that scene is fantastic. But
yeah, it is.
Because Raul Julia gets what kind of goofy movie he's in and plays it right up. And Ming-Na Wen matches energy in that scene, and it's great. But that joke with the John Wayne Gacy painting is just fantastic. Because he's a psychopath, right?
Yeah.
And you need to say he's a psychopath without showing him just like killing 15 people and stuff like that. And that's a great way to see it, is he saw Gacy's work and said, I will do my own version. And that's what makes his performance really fun. And obviously in that scene, we get that line that was just referenced in the clip. It was Tuesday. He's just chewing scenery, and it's all really fun stuff.
Raul Julia looked at M. Bison the same as the type of villain as Richard III. He also researched dictators and crime lords to incorporate into the character of M. Bison.
A lot of Mussolini.
He took Benito Mussolini's hand gestures, Joseph Stalin's mannerisms, Pablo Escobar's elusiveness, and Hitler's love of art. So that's why you have all those paintings in there. And that's why there are different things like that.
So we're going to talk about Raul Julia here now for a minute. Obviously I mentioned she was dying a couple times, but be that as it may, not only is he very sick at this moment in time, but he has to know the script isn't very good and is very silly. And at no point does he not give 110% to this performance. He is all in on playing the character of M. Bison.
He really is.
The work he does is just phenomenal in this movie. He does not treat this as though it's a kid's movie. He, like you said, he did the research and he brought all that to the character, which makes Bison full of life. Like there's so much to his pathos and what he thinks, and none of that's in that screenplay or the direction. It's all in how Raul Julia plays that character in part.
Well, it's just like him in Addams Family.
Yeah, he took that seriously, and look what happened.
He is Gomez Addams.
Yeah, no one can ever play that part again without being compared to him. I feel bad for Luis Guzman, an actor I love, but every time Gomez opens his mouth, you think Raul Julia. That's what you want. He made that character his own. And, to some extent, I think he does that with Bison in cinema. I would have, loved to have, obviously I would love if he'd lived on to maybe, voice the character. I would have really enjoyed that, honestly. But that's obviously, sadly, not how things really turned out. But the work he puts in is above this movie, but it's very typical of what Raul Julia does. And this movie was lucky to have him, because without him, I don't think anybody give two shits about this movie.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, the plot of the movie.
Who's the protagonist?
Yeah.
Honestly, like, I know it's supposed to be Guile, but he's off screen for like 30 minutes at a time. Like Ryu and Ken pick up a little bit. Chun-Li, I'd say Chun-Li is the most obvious candidate to be the lead, the protagonist of the film. To me,
she's the best in the movie.
Yeah. Well, she has a real vendetta. I mean, she actually has something to be upset about.
Ming-Na Wen cringed after she saw Street Fighter for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
She told her ER co-star George Clooney that the movie would kill her career. He told her, "Oh, honey, it takes a lot to kill a career. I should know."
Yeah. That's a great story, a great quote, and I'm glad that she's Ming-Na Wen, fantastic actress, has had an incredibly long career. I always smile when I see Ming-Na Wen, and I will always think of her as Chun-Li, because it was the first time I was introduced to her, and because of that, I've always like, hey, it's Ming-Na Wen, it's Chun-Li. And so I've seen a lot of her movies that I shouldn't have. So it is, I've always been a fan of hers, and it really is because she made me a fan in this movie. And I hope now she can value that and appreciate the sort of campy vibe that she helped build in that movie. Because she's really one of the only few actors who's kind of game for what's going on.
The movie manages to be about Street Fighter, right? Mm-hmm. And Street Fighter is a fighting tournament, correct?
It is, yes.
So why did the director choose not to do a fighting tournament?
So listen, here's my theory on D'Souza, who objectively wrote a bad screenplay and directed a bad movie. But listen, it's like your dad interpretation of Street Fighter is everything that this movie is, because that's all it could ever be. Like, he just sat down and saw his kids play and heard about this thing being optioned and watched them play for an hour and was like, yeah, I got it. I figured out the gist of this. No big deal. I don't need to look into anything.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it. This guy's the boss. He's a warlord. This is a kung fu guy. This is a soldier guy. I can figure this out. And so, and that's all he could really bring to the adaptation. Like, he just doesn't really understand the property, because how could he? Like, if I had to adapt a screenplay of Maya's tablet game, Unicorn Hospital, what the fuck would I know about adapting that, right?
Right.
I'm not going to take the time to learn the characters or their lore or anything like that. Who cares? Like, I would think I'm a real writer. I don't need to look at this children's stuff. And that's probably how D'Souza looked at it until like Capcom started really throwing their weight around. I mean, do you kind of agree, or what do you think?
Do you know he deferred his salary to pay for the cast?
That was a bad decision. No.
Yeah.
Well, Van Damme probably got paid a lot of cash.
From what I read about D'Souza, he sounds like a nice guy.
Oh yeah, like no one has a bad thing to say about him.
Like
even in this
really
production,
nice
like a lot of crew members really spoke highly of him. Raul Julia did. You know, a lot of people have. And like I said, he did write some really fantastic screenplays, but this was the only movie he really directed in pretty much the end of his writing career. He wrote a few more things after this, but I mean, he didn't make it in the 2000s to write anything after that. I think in 97 he was done.
This movie features a Wilhelm scream.
Oh, does it now?
Yeah.
I missed it. Where'd it come up?
The first AN aid worker thrown into Bison's pit in the opening montage.
Oh, I can't believe I missed that.
Yeah,
I know. I've never really paid attention to it before, but I'm glad we caught it. So we have one on the Wilhelm count. So that's good. I'm glad we have that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think. There's a lot of things in the movie that really bother me.
Yeah, we could go on and on.
Well, yeah, and I think I do want to say one thing in Mr. D'Souza's behalf is that he really wanted to do like the original characters in the original game, and not even all of them. And Capcom really made him put in all of the characters. Because of that, we get the World Warriors day jobs. Which, yeah, Chun-Li, instead of being an Interpol agent, becomes a reporter, and her camera guys are Balrog and E Honda for some reason. But that's the only way he could figure to try to get them in the story he was already working on. So because of that, this movie is just stuffed with characters. And some of them are really only referenced like once or have like a couple lines of dialogue. Like T-Hawk gets to nod a couple times and talk about his headband. And, a lot of these guys are really miscast as well, which doesn't help for the authenticity. I mean, the actor who plays Ken, I think he does a decent job in the movie, but I mean, the man has like no muscle definition to try to pull off being like a fighter.
Yeah.
So it really does hurt. I mentioned Blanca earlier being a small guy, which only makes it stand out that like, Zangief is enormous, and the same thing with the actor who played E Honda. But like Balrog, while he does look like the character, man, like that guy has like the most noodle boxer arm I've ever seen. We take for granted the level of shape an actor will get in for a comic book movie today, or anything like that, or that kind of role.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the norm.
Chris Evans and the like have ruined that.
Yeah, that wasn't the norm in the 90s. And you can see that in the Street Fighter movie. Like a lot of guys in that movie don't look threatening or intimidating at all. And like Raul Julia was a strong enough actor to make him always seem like a threat. So that didn't matter. So, that's, one element of it. Maybe the American flag stencil on the most Belgian man who's ever lived. Maybe that's one element, because the flag on him looks super fake.
Yeah,
it really does. It looks like it just stenciled, spray painted on, and they were just ready to go. That was it. It just, it's another lazy element of like the production in this movie.
Is there anything else you want to say about this movie before we move on?
No, I really don't think there is. I like I said, it's weird that I will recommend this movie to a fan of the video game. I think if you are maybe 20 or under and you've never seen this before and you've been a bit curious, I think this is incredible, campy, cheesy fun. And I understand it is not a very good movie, but it does get to the level of so bad it's good. And I really do give it a light recommend. If you are not a fan of video games, if you've never heard of Street Fighter, if you don't care about that sort of thing, but if you're a fan of camp and cheese cinema, if you like Plan 9 from Outer Space or things like that, you should really consider watching Street Fighter, because Steven D'Souza didn't really intend for that, but I think he made a near masterful piece of camp. And that's tough to do, and it helps when it's unintentional. But this movie has so much cheese dripping from it, and has such a disorganized feel that it really is camp gold. Now I want to mention to you, like most camp movies, I mean it's lousy. So like the fight scenes are poorly edited. We didn't even really discuss that.
The fight choreography.
Yeah, one thing to quickly mention about the movie is it's called Street Fighter. And this movie avoids one-on-one fights like the plague.
Yeah.
I think that's a great gag if you really think about it, like to make a Street Fighter movie and people really don't fight one-on-one till like the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
When people really start doing that. I think it's kind of a hilarious thing. But like I said, the movie does have real camp value. So if that's your thing, I certainly recommend you checking it out.
In life, there is beauty.
And we have this piece of shit.
And there is terror.
I at least if you gave me, if you put me on an island with these two movies, I would gladly rewatch Street Fighter over and over again. But this movie?
Yeah, Legend of Chun-Li, which we'll refer to this as Legend of Chun-Li. We won't call it Street Fighter. So, yeah, and listen, I think I just gave a really nice review to Street Fighter, and I think watching this movie right afterwards made me definitely appreciate that movie, because there's some real love and attention in that one. It's misguided and goofy, but there is love and attention in Street Fighter 94. This movie is a cheap cash-in, and it feels cheap, it looks cheap, and it feels cheap. I mean, that's really the only way I can put it. This is really a subpar cinema experience masquerading as an attempt at a gritty reboot.
Yeah, it was an awful watch. I mean, I feel like I wasted my goddamn time.
Yeah. So this movie stars... when did this movie come out?
2009.
2009, okay. So in 2009, Andrei Bartokovic, I don't know how to say his name, sorry. I should have written that better in my notes. He directed this film, and Kristen Kreuk, Chris Klein, Neil McDonough, Robin Shou, a little crossover Mortal Kombat, an actress with maybe the greatest name ever, Moon Bloodgood. That's right, Moon Bloodgood. And Taboo, and of course, Michael Clark Duncan in this movie. I didn't see this one in theaters. I didn't see, because I knew it looked bad.
What sucks is we did this movie for like a Bad Movie Friday, like not too long ago.
Yeah.
So we had to watch this movie
less than a year ago.
Again.
Less than a year ago we did it.
Yeah.
And when we watched it, I was one of the things like, oh man, I underestimated it, because we just talked about like almost masterful camp from D'Souza in the first movie, and this movie doesn't have that going for it at all. It's just a dull, lousy experience. I think there can be some laughs at the bad choreography, but like there isn't a level of like cheese to anything else, or a level of passion to it, which I think a movie needs to hit like, maximum camp value. Talk about it a lot, like Showgirls. Like Paul Verhoeven wasn't setting out to make a terrible movie people would laugh at, but he did anyway. Sure, it's not intentional here, but there's just a soullessness to this movie that is, I think, a little jarring.
Yeah, not to mention they make Kristen Kreuk speak Chinese in this movie.
Yes, that's right. She does.
And it's awful.
So we do want to mention that, yes, she is playing a Chinese character, which Chun-Li is always portrayed as being Chinese from China. So Kristen Kreuk does have a little bit of Asian ancestry, in her. So it's not like someone who, doesn't have any kind of lineage at all. But I mean, she does look very white. She looks like a white girl walking around in what's supposed to be Bangkok.
She looks like me walking around.
Yeah, pretty much. Because she looks like a white girl walking around. She's small and slight. She doesn't look very convincing as the strongest woman in the world.
No,
to say the least. Which is what Chun-Li is supposed to be. So she's
very slight, like very slight. She doesn't really have any like arm definition. You talk about a wet noodle look.
Yeah. We were spoiled last week by Alicia Vikander getting in that kind of shape, because Kreuk never looks like a fighter in any way, shape, or form. She looks like she just got back from Pilates.
Yeah.
That's the kind of physique that she has, and it really shows. The fight scenes are laughably bad, There isn't many of them, so the wire work and the fight choreography is bad, and Kreuk really does not look athletic at all in the few things that she is able to do.
Not to mention she narrates. Why does this movie have narration?
I don't really know, and I wanted to get a couple clips for you guys.
I hate narration.
Because you can't understand the level of lifeless narration. She makes like Harrison Ford seem giddy in Blade Runner.
But what I found, I wasn't prepared for. Everywhere I looked, there was crime without punishment. I wanted to do something. Anything.
No emotion in her voice.
Nothing, yeah.
Know where to begin.
Nothing
She's just
there.
she's just walking around Bangkok, just like looking like pensive. This whole
Looking
time,
at
right?
things.
Yeah.
Going through a market and
Who could protect
going
these
through an
people?
alleyway.
Who was oppressing them?
I mean, it's really bad. That's really the only thing I can say about it. And listen, I'd seen a little bit of Smallville, so I was aware that Kristen Kreuk was not a very good actress. So I was very surprised when I saw her as Chun-Li. And even when this came out in the mid-O's, people were very critical of her playing an Asian character, especially, one like Chun-Li, because she is, famously Chinese. So, that didn't really work. And the one thing that should be noted about this is everything about this at the time felt, cheap. I know they were desperate to kind of reboot everything, but like, when I play the trailer and like when you watch it, everything about the movie feels low grade and lazy. Every single thing about it.
Yeah, it cost $18 million to make, which is not a lot.
No, and we had to double check that because on Wikipedia it said 50 million. I was like, this is no $50 million movie.
Yeah. It made 12.8, so it did not make its money back.
Yeah, and we want to mention that once again, the original Street Fighter did make money. I mean, it made a good chunk of change. And this movie with a really tight and skinny budget, really failed to make an impact. So
maybe when people saw a Street Fighter movie called Street Fighter and they went to see it, they didn't get a Street Fighter movie.
Yeah, so we talked about in the last movie, like costumes sort of being accurate, and this movie isn't interested in that at all.
No,
not in the least. And that's fine. It's okay to do a more realistic interpretation if you're going to do that, but this doesn't feel like a realistic interpretation. It feels like the direct-to-video sequel didn't have the money to pull off real costumes. So, and Bison wears a suit, and Balrog doesn't even get boxing gloves. Chun-Li does not don her famous attire for some reason.
Bison is also apparently Irish.
So, yeah. I do want to mention that this is how actor Neil McDonough chose to portray Bison after, taking over the mantle from Raul Julia.
Fantastic, isn't it? All these waterfront slums will soon belong to shadowloo.
It's not even a good accent.
I mean, it's not bad.
4 months.
I don't hate it, but it's a very slight Irish accent.
Yeah.
Bring the package to Bangkok.
Can we talk about one other thing too?
There is no room for error.
Shadowloo or Shadowlaw.
Shadowloo.
So yeah, we get this in the original film, Shadowloo, right? That's what they say.
Yeah, and it's spelled Shadowloo.
Yeah, Shadowloo, and then it's in this one it's Shadowlao, which I think is like L-A-U is kind of like how it's supposed to be pronounced. And then I did watch another movie as well that's like Shadow Law, like they were clearly saying law. So I have no idea how that's pronounced, to be honest. I've always said Shadowloo.
I'm going with Shadowloo because that's to me is the funnest one.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's the way to go on words that you're really not certain how they're supposed to be pronounced. It's not that important at the end of the day.
So why do you think that they chose not to? I mean, Chun-Li's attire is nothing at all close to what she wore in the video games. Even the video games that I know I haven't played.
Yeah.
She doesn't look like it. So why would they choose to make a movie that's not Street Fighter-y? Just call it Rise of Patricia.
Yeah, and this is not like
Legend of Patricia.
Yeah, I'd watch The Legend of Patricia. The Legend of Pat. Now I want that movie. I keep thinking about It's Pat combined with a kung fu film. No, I don't want that. I remember the It's Pat movie.
Yeah,
the greatest cinematic experience of Ween's career. All right, so back to Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li. This is probably one of the things that baffles me the most is like, how this really got off the ground, or like how they really thought that they could do like a low grade Street Fighter experience and try to make some money out of it. Because this is something where you're going to need a budget, and you're going to need to focus it on the right things. You're going to need to focus it on like fight choreography and a director who has some experience with that. And that's not really what they went with in this movie, because the fight choreography is really terrible. They don't necessarily care about the lore of Street Fighter. I am not familiar with the lore, really after like Street Fighter 3, because that's the last time I played religiously. I played 3 and Street Fighter Alpha. I played the entire Alpha series. But really after that, obviously I was in for Marvel vs. Capcom and some of those crossovers. But now that Street Fighter is 3D, I probably haven't played a new Street Fighter game in probably a decade. Maybe a little bit less than that. So, I mean, if they did things that are newer in the series, that's fine. But, either way, the story is completely unengaging.
Not to mention there's lazy research. There's this really lazy research scene on the computer.
Oh, yeah, I remember. It's good to point little things like this out.
Yeah.
That's really lazy filmmaking.
Oh, it's so bad.
So, yeah, I forget what she's looking for, but she literally just like types it in to like their version of Google, and like where she needs to go for the next scene just pops up on the screen, right?
Yeah, of course.
And she just smiles into the camera. Like literally just like a smile, almost winks into the camera.
There's no like scrolling.
No,
There's
nothing.
It just pops up.
Yeah, it's the
That's
laziest
how the internet works.
The laziest research
Even then.
montage. Yeah.
Even then.
I felt like a test audience said, we don't understand how she got from point A to point B, and they shot this scene with like $5,000 one day.
Yeah.
They're like, let's get an internet cafe, let's get Kreuk for half a day and get the hell out of there. Because that's how it feels, and then it's kind of how it looks.
There's not much you can say about this movie.
Well, I mean, I think if you're a fan of Chun-Li, this is upsetting.
It is.
If you're a fan, if you're a fan of the series, it's upsetting. You don't want to see
if you're a fan of movies, you're upsetting.
Yeah, you don't want to see a franchise you like done this poorly. I mean, it's not quite Dragon Ball Evolution, but I mean, it's close. I mean, it's real close. I mean, this movie has all sorts of strange things in it. I want to talk about the finale a little bit. Since we're going to recap the plot of the movie, it's fucking pointless. But in the finale, she fights Bison. She builds up this fireball, which looks terrible, right? She does this kind of like half slow motion arm waving effect that, there's kind of like trails on the arms. It doesn't look convincing. She throws the fireball and she incapacitates M. Bison. And then she jumps from the roof of the building and clamps her feet on his head and snaps his neck fatality style and just fucking kills him like she just walked into Mortal Kombat for no reason.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck is that? But there's another time, like, doesn't she shoot something? No, she stabs somebody, right?
Yeah, she stabs somebody.
Yeah, she stabs somebody and kills him. I was like, God damn, Chun-Li got a body count. It's not what I expected. And it's not what I think of when I think of the Chun-Li character, to be perfectly frank. Now, she might have been redone or rebooted to where she kills on a whim, but that's not the way I think of Street Fighter.
In this movie, Vega is Native American, as opposed to Spanish in the video games. He normally wears a mask to protect his beauty, but in the movie, he hides his face. There's all kinds of examples of this.
Yeah, he's played by Taboo, a member of the Black Eyed Peas.
Yeah.
It's pretty forgettable. There's not great wire work in the sequence.
Yeah.
I mean,
I thought the guy in Street Fighter did a better job at playing Vega.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what the character's
supposed
to look. Yeah, supposed to look like, and he got the idea down to protect his face and things like that. I enjoyed that. I don't know why Vega's inclusion was here. I guess because he has a claw, and because you can put a mask on his face, you can put a stuntman on him. In that part, real easy.
M. Bison's daughter was based on Rose from Alpha series.
Yeah, she's Rose. She's not the same character's name then.
She speaks Russian in the movie, but is Italian, and not M. Bison's daughter.
No, she isn't. They just took a random character name and said, throw her in there too.
Yeah.
Like she's from the new games. Like I know awful lot. I don't play as Rose, but I remember when I heard that name, I was like, well, that's not really who that character is, but that's not really what the movie's concerned about.
There's only 8 Street Fighter characters as opposed to the last movie where there was like 1,000.
There's 1,000. Yeah, where they had to squeeze in everybody from the Super Street Fighter 2 roster except for Fei Long. And I guess Akuma is in there, but he's a secret character. Now that I think about it, I would have loved to have seen their take on what Akuma would have been in Street Fighter 94.
Those who didn't make appearances in the movie: Abel Akuma, Blanca, Cammy White, Dan Hibiki, Dalsum, E. Honda, El Fuerte, Fei Long, Gukin, Ken Masters, Rufus, Sagat, Sakura Kasigahu, Seth, Zangief, and Ryu.
Wow.
That's a lot of characters that were left
You didn't
out.
have to name them all.
I didn't?
You didn't. But I appreciate you naming them all.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I do.
I thought we'd be all encompassing.
Yeah, you're very thorough about it. Yeah, I mean, it's like, oh, she's going down the list. I'm impressed. And you just kept on going. Yeah, well, I'm going to cut all that out.
Wow.
No, this is a good idea, is to not put in every character from the game, just sort of tell a story about a few of the characters. But once again, it's just not a very good
And
story,
even if you wanted to tell the story about Chun-Li, that's great. Tell the story about Chun-Li. She's a great character.
Yeah, you can really do that.
Do a better job and make it more like the games.
Yeah, I think that's what you want to do. You want to, have like a fighting tournament of some kind, or an excuse for characters to fight one-on-one multiple times. You know, I don't want to see Chun-Li fighting henchmen. You know, I mean, it's okay if you do it once, but like the club scene is so cringy. She has this whole sequence where she tries to seduce one of like Bison's bodyguards, right? Or one of Bison's managers or something. I don't know. And like, so she's dancing sexily on the dance floor. It reminded me of like True Lies, when he's like, dance sexy, and she's like twirling her arms and stuff, like doing the least sexy dance she really could. But Kristen Kreuk's really trying to like bring that sex appeal. And I remember this from Smallville. There's a few times they tried to like make her sexy, and she could never really be sexy. She was just pretty. That she just couldn't do it. I don't know what it was. It never worked. And that scene is so bad in this movie. Like, it's almost cringy kind of bad. It makes you uncomfortable how awful that whole sequence is with her trying to seduce that woman. And then there is more poor wire work. We get her spin kick. We do get a version of that, and it looks terrible.
Yeah.
It looks absolutely awful. They shouldn't have bothered. I don't know if it's called the spin. I'm sure it has another name, but you know what I'm talking about. Her signature move.
Yeah.
And it looks really bad. You know, it really does. There's a close up on the Kristen Kreuk stunt woman's ass in the scene. And I don't, like there's the way they shoot it. It's just terrible.
Yeah.
Everything about it is just, it's just off putting. It really is. Like anytime the movie you think could maybe make a layup to do something nice and get a little something going, it just never happens. It might be a movie with no good scenes.
So what you're saying is you wouldn't recommend it?
Well, if you're the president of the Chris Klein fan club, maybe. And that's the thing. We haven't even mentioned him in the movie full of bad acting work, except for maybe like Robin Shue. And Michael Clark Duncan's fine. You have Chris Klein, who is playing Charlie. He's another character from the games. He is Guile's friend. And fun fact, in the first movie, his character is combined with Blanca, and he's turned into basically Blanca at the end of the movie. But Charlie would become a major character in the Street Fighter Alpha game, so he's represented here. And Chris Klein is awful, like legendarily
He's really bad.
awful. I was trying to find some clips, and I do have some, and I was going to play it, but it doesn't do it justice, because you have to see like his dead eyes as he acts to really understand how awful Klein is really as an actor. Because you can hear his bad deliveries, and they're all bad. They really feel like,
He doesn't like emote with his face.
yeah, like his dead face doesn't match what he's saying. And it really does sound like everything's like a joke performance. Like someone's doing a parody of David Caruso from CSI Miami. Like that's how he sounds. Like he's doing that character for like a bad SNL skit is what I was trying to say. But he's trying to do like a bad SNL skit. But it's really how he's playing the character. And it, that part you can get a real chuckle out of. Then Moon Bloodgood is like so horny for him, right? Like she is just like enraptured by everything that he does. And she like changes shirts in front of him to try to like lure him in. But he's so focused on Bison. He doesn't have time for that. Because he doesn't even like look at her as like a sexual object in any way, shape, or form. He's only concerned about stopping Bison.
And they do make out.
They do, but he did, and it's the weirdest thing. Like, Balrog comes out of Bison's club, barely glances their direction, and he goes, quick, and he just covers her face and makes out with her. And I'm like, he's not looking at you. And I was like, well, I guess we could talk about it being a creep, but then he never really does anything about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a, like, subtext. Well, not even subtext. There is her yearning for him in that one scene, but it's not like a love story at all. It's no real story to it.
It feels
It's
like a
just that.
separate movie.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. Like, oh, we got to put in an extra character, so they throw in Chris Klein, and it's awful. It does come together for the finale where he does I think shoot at Bison or Vega, or he shoots at somebody, and like he gives Chun-Li like a wink and a nod, which is just perfect.
All right. Are you ready for reviews?
I am ready for reviews. Lay them on me.
Yeah, because there's nothing else we should say about this movie.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, it's an awful film. A non-recommend from both of us.
Street Fighter 94 got a 3.9 user review, 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 4 out of 10 on IMDb. Street Fighter Rise of Chun-Li got a 2.4 user review, a 3% on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 3.7 out of 10 on IMDb.
Pretty low.
Yeah.
That's fair, though. That's where it should be at.
And I did something a little different this week.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. What do we got?
Instead of doing 1-star reviews, I chose 10-star reviews.
Okay.
Here's the first one. This is for Street Fighter. A cinematic achievement to rival greats such as Citizen Kane and Godfather 2, with Jean Claude Van Damme as a tough, undetermined soldier who will stop at nothing to save hostages, with emotional performance from everyone who is giving it their all for this thought-provoking and cunning script. Highly recommend you watch it with all your funniest friends, and you will have a blast.
The man enjoys him some camp cinema.
What I love about this review is he likened it to Citizen Kane and The Godfather 2, two of some of the best cinematic experiences you could possibly have.
Well, he's clearly a better film critic than I am. I now default to this man. I will follow him on all social media because I await his next review with bated breath. Hey, I'm glad he loved it. Listen, this is a movie that I feel could have some fans. I'm very curious about a good review for the next one, though. I really am. Yeah.
Are you ready for it?
Lay it on me.
This review is called A Crime Lord to Rival The Godfather.
Oh, God.
This movie absolutely blew me away. First off, I would like to point out of that Michael Clark Duncan's performance in this rivals the performance he put in The Green Mile. He totally blew me away. Secondly, Neil McDonough, also known as Bison, is the most terrifying and intimidating bad guy to ever be portrayed on the screen. The barehanded C-section he performs is something that not even Chuck Norris could do. Thirdly, Moon Bloodgood is the best name ever. And finally...
You're spot on there.
And finally, Chris Klein is the one that brings the movie together. His performance is quite simply astounding in every conceivable way. He just might be the next Tom Hanks. His performance is so powerful that I would not be all surprised if he is in talks for the Oscar next year. He is really easily the reason this movie is top 250 material.
See, this is the kind of guy who buys the day old sushi. He eats the ends of the bread loaf. This is that guy. He's like, the worst. It's fantastic. He's always buying the store brand. He doesn't know. He just is like, this is the good stuff right here. And so his taste has been so skewered that he absolutely loves one of the worst films that we've ever seen.
Can you imagine the movies in his film collection?
Yeah. He has that Battlefield Earth. He's like, dude, this is the best movie. He just all the worst movies. Yeah. Gods and Generals. He just has this awful collection. He has a poster of Ishtar in his bedroom. Listen, if you're a Street Fighter fan, it was a little bit rough, but you didn't get a chance to watch this one. Before we close out, I want to talk about one other movie. So we got an animated film in 1995.
Is now the ultimate.
And that came out, I think, in Japan. I don't think we got it in the States till a bit later. And I saw the US version, which has some late 90s music dubbed in there, some Korn and stuff in there. And this movie is a Street Fighter movie all the way through. It's animated, so everybody looks like how they should. They squeeze in the characters of the proper moments and times. And it features a ton of one-on-one fighting scenes, which is what I absolutely love. And probably the best moment in the entire Street Fighter cinematic universe would be a fight between Chun-Li and Vega. He comes into her apartment right after she took a shower and attempts to murder her, and she kicks the ever-living shit out of him. And she does kill him, but it's after an incredibly brutal fight where it is agreed it is to the death. And that, like, I'm okay with that. Like, Vega came there to raise the stakes, and she ends up kicking him literally out of a window and killing him. And I mean, it messes her up. She's out for the rest of the movie. And I wanted to mention this movie because this is where, if you want to get a Street Fighter cinematic fix, this is where you want to go. If you can, check out the Japanese version. It's uncensored. It has blood in it. The US version is fine. It's available on YouTube in a bunch of places. As a matter of fact, I think one of the YouTube versions is the Japanese version with the American track underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of ways that you can watch. It's also available on Amazon Prime. But I mean, it's just an incredibly well done anime movie that pays respects to the characters properly and gives us a lot more what we want. Those relationships that if you played the game, you know about. Like Ryu and Ken beating Bison together at the end of the movie is a really nice experience because they bring a rivalry together as brothers. And like the movie has a core message, something none of these other movies have or care about. So it was nice to see one that actually did take the property seriously. And I'd hope that if they do reboot it again, we'll get something even close to that kind of quality.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed it.
Yeah, it's really something that should be checked out. That's the real recommend from this episode. Street Fighter 2, the animated movie. And if you check it out and if you like it, you want to thank me, you can reach out to us at grittyrebootcast@gmail.com. That's our email address, and we try to answer everything that we get there. And you can also look us up on Gritty Reboot at Instagram and TikTok as well.
Yep.
And you can find me. I'm Disillusionist13 at Twitter. And I'm there every now and then, but not much. And your socials, Meredith?
I don't have any socials.
That's right. She doesn't have any goddamn socials. So
I'm on Facebook.
Yeah, if you want to get a hold of her, you just write Gritty Reboot on a carrier pigeon. He will eventually find his way to her, and he will answer, and he will drop it off, and Meredith will answer your question.
I tell you what, if you start getting comments that I need a social media, I will get a social media.
Yeah, and
until then.
Yeah.
Fuck social media.
We're about to launch a Discord. You can't say things like that.
Oh, yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. We appreciate you listening. You guys have a good one.
Bye.
I thought you were going to say something inside out before I pressed stop. And I just look up and just like, fuck it. I'm not saying bye to these assholes.